works. Well, I am not from Colorado originally. Though this is absolutely home now, and I hope that I'll never have to leave it. I grew up in Georgia, playing in the creeks and the woods there, and I learned in about middle school that not every kid gets to do that. None of my classmates were going into the neighborhood creeks like Shook's Run here and playing in those spaces and picking up frog eggs and chasing white-tailed deer and learning about these things. So I started in about 6th grade dragging my friends outside every opportunity I got, and I have never stopped. That mission has taken me sort of all around the United States. I've taught outdoor and environmental education in New England, New Mexico, worked as a backpacking guide, all of those places. But I wouldn't be the teacher I am today if I hadn't ever gotten a teaching license. And I wouldn't have gotten a teaching license if I hadn't ever lived in Minnesota for a couple years. So the story that I have to share with you tonight is about a year that one of Mother Earth's smaller creatures taught me, and I think taught a lot of us, not to take the little things in life for granted and to enjoy that beauty and to share that beauty and wonder with others, always. So at the time I was living in this big white 2-story wooden farmhouse that had a green roof, and it sat on the edge, on the only point in this big, long, deep, clear lake in the north woods of Minnesota. So it was surrounded by these really tall white pine trees, like twice as tall as the ponderosa pine trees that we have here in Colorado. Just a beautiful scene, always full of loons and wild birds and flowers and lots of water. And I shared this farmhouse with several other college graduates like myself, and we were living and working up here in the middle of nowhere in the woods because we were teaching outdoor and environmental education at the Audubon Center of the North Woods. It's a residential outdoor and environmental education center where school groups, like a whole 6th grade level, all 150, 200 kids would come out for a week at a time and live in the dorms up there, and they would do classes with us. So in the wintertime, Minnesota gets lots of snow. So we go cross-country skiing, and we go snowshoeing, and we go tracking. Winter was a wonderful time to be in Minnesota. And then it would turn, the seasons would change, and we would get spring and summer and fall, and the wildflowers would come out, and we would get to go birding. And of course, at a place with a name like the Audubon Center of the North Woods, that may sound familiar because if you remember a little bit of your history, John James Audubon in the early 1800s was a French-American painter in a time when the West was still wild, when the North Woods of Minnesota were also largely uncharted. And Audubon made it his mission to go around and to observe birds and to find birds and to paint birds, life-size images of birds. I mean, even great blue herons that are huge, life-size in their natural habitats, to bring the beauty of these birds back to the East Coast and back to Europe so that everybody could see what was out here. So I was really proud to be doing birding and bird banding at the Audubon Center of the North Woods. We were lucky enough to have 7 birds of prey living on site with us that did education and outreach programs with us. I've never had a better coworker than some of these birds. When you think birds of prey, you think about bald eagles and hawks and great horned owls. These huge birds that can stretch out their wings. And their wingspan is wider than you are tall. These are big birds. And as a teacher naturalist at Audubon, it was my job and my pleasure to work with one of these birds of prey. And the bird that I worked with was the tiniest of them all. She's only about 6 to 8 inches tall. She was an American kestrel, She's the smallest of the North American falcons. They're beautiful. They're very petite. They have these, all falcons have really big, deep black eyes that are sort of as deep as space and as bright as the stars. They've got these coppery brown feathers complemented by these really nice cobalt blue markings, fantails, and sharp triangular wings like all falcons have, just really, really built for speed, all falcons. Down to her little petite talons. I mean, you think about a bald eagle and he's got these great big talons. Well, she was a falcon, she's a bird of prey, so she had these itty bitty tiny scary talons. But her talons were just the right size for catching tasty field mice. And her sharp, curved beak was just right with a perfect little notch in it just for snapping backbones so that she could eat those shrews. Good job. Tasty. And the reason, well, this bird's name was Freya. She's a girl. Freya is, she got her name from the Norse goddess of beauty and love and fertility, who wore a cloak of falcon feathers. And this little bird had so much beauty and love in her. And I know, it's a little weird to anthropomorphize animals, but this bird was full of love, and she really shared it with others. This little bird was at Audubon, like all of the birds there, because she was injured, non-releasable. That means something bad happened to her that made it so that she couldn't be a wild bird anymore. She couldn't hunt, she couldn't fly far enough, she couldn't catch food for herself anymore and survive in the wild. And what had happened to Freya is that she was probably looking across the road at a really tasty morsel of mouse, and she took off across the road to go eat the mouse, and like most birds of prey, she did not look both ways. And she got hit by a car. So she, on the side that she'd been hit by, she was totally blind in that eye. And if you've ever had an eye problem, if you've ever had to wear an eye patch, you may know that if you have to have an eye patch and only have one eye, you lose your depth perception. You can't tell how far away things are or how close they are. Now, Freya, this kestrel's wings were fine. She could fly mechanically, physically. Her bones and her joints and her muscles worked for flying. But she couldn't see, depth perception-wise, to land without crashing. Now, this is a little problematic for a bird because if you've observed some birds perhaps in your daily life, they love flying. And my heart really went out to this little bird, this little kestrel, because she loved to fly, but she couldn't really fly safely many places. I mean, she had a really big flight cage or a mew where she was, where she lived, and we couldn't move her perches around because she knew where her perches were, and it took her so long to learn where they were because at first she crashed around until she figured out where everything was. I was really rough on the feathers and a little bruised. So I got to thinking about this because this bird, like I said, she was really full of love. She was so positive about all this. She wasn't grumpy. Some birds of prey are grumpy. That's another story. I decided that I was going to try and help Freya with her problem. So one day I got Freya out and I tucked, I got a bunch of tasty little slivers of raw quail already and kind of stuffed in a fanny pack that I put on. And I put Freya down on a rope perch. It's a roped iron perch, so it was really sturdy. And I held my hand out in front of her, and I held out a piece of that really yummy looking quail, and I tapped my hand, and I dangled that quail, and Freya kind of thought about that for a little bit, and then that kestrel kind of stuck her foot out and took that step. And she got onto my glove, and I gave her the quail, and she thought that was really cool. Okay, well, no big deal. She can take a step, right? Well, progress, adaptation. You work on it a little bit, and day after day after day, we worked on this until my glove was a little further away and a little further away and a little further away until she had to take a bigger step, and then a hop. And then the hop became one of those things where she had to kind of flare her wings out a little bit to take a little bit of a glide. And within a couple of months, she was not only flying again, but because she could hear, she could land without crashing. She thought that was really cool. She thought that was so cool that it didn't matter what kind of errand I was on. If I walked by her flight cage or her mew on doing something else, she would fly over to the nearest perch and she would give a little twitter and she'd kind of go crick, because she thought, hey, maybe Tracy's gonna come out here and we're gonna go flying. Yeah. So this was really excellent. I mean, we had a really good relationship with the falcon. She made all kinds of great other noises too. If she was really hungry and I would bring her a lot of food, she would do this noise that falcons usually only make when they're little, when they're still in the nest. So it was pretty incredible that she would make this noise for me. And she would ask for food because she really wanted some of that quail, and she would go. Well, so Freya got to be a pretty noisy little American kestrel. Well, one evening we had a group of about 140 fifth graders in. I mean, the students were really something when they would arrive. It would be Monday morning and they'd show up on the school bus and they'd kind of tumble out with all their luggage, so excited to be out of Minneapolis, to be out of the big city and to be into the woods, to be up by this lake and out where all these birds were, to do all of these things. So we had all of these fourth graders here for an evening program, and the evening program for the night was a bird of prey presentation. Okay, so usually in a bird of prey presentation, we go through the different groups of birds and we talk about their adaptations, what's different about an owl from a hawk, and those things. And we got to the part where it was my turn to bring the little American kestrel out to go and get the falcon. And I leaned over to take Freya out of her crate. They kind of go in crates like your dog or your cat goes in a crate, except it's got a perch in it. So you open the door, and when I opened the door, she kind of went, crick, which was pretty normal. But the audience behind me gasped. So I turned around to kind of see what was wrong. Everything was fine. Freya was fine, so I went ahead and took her out, talked about all of her great falcon adaptations, put her back in her crate, finished the program, everything's fine. Wrap everything up, students head off to the dorms, go to brush their teeth. But one of the teacher aides hung back with a small group of students. And they kind of caught my attention, and she said, May we speak with you for a moment? She was very serious. And I couldn't quite figure out what was going on. I said, well, of course. I mean, I love our school groups. Of course I'll help you. So she asked me sort of a funny question. She said, your bird, the kestrel, she made a noise when you opened the carrier. Do you think you could make her do that again? And I said, well, I can't make her. But thinking about the noisy Freya, I said, she probably will. I can set her up to do it. Well, she'll probably do it. Let me try. And she said, oh, if you would try, that would be wonderful. The students were just really amazed by what she sounded like. And I said, oh, okay. Well, we've got a small group of students here, so sure, come a little closer, guys. So I put my glove back on, and I opened up the door, and as soon as Freya got that door opened up, she made her characteristic little because she thought that was great. We're going to go fly, right? And the little girl who was standing next to me, her jaw dropped open. And the look on her face was pure awe. The piece of information that you're missing is that I had a group of students from this school who were hearing impaired. And for the first time in their entire lives, they heard a bird make a noise. Every day, we hear these beautiful little songs, these small noises. We see trees, we hear wind. I will never be able to hear a bird song again without thinking about these students. I'll never be able to take it for granted, and I think always of Freya and remember that she will also never take flying for granted. And I appreciate everything that she shared with me and that she shared with those students who now know that birds do in fact make noise.